Wow, it's great to be back here in this beautiful space on this beautiful campus. I'm not sure if you noticed, but we've been here for a few days and been able to feel all the love that's here. And big thanks to Vera. Let's give Vera a big hand for all she does to keep this place so beautiful, really wonderful. And so many people giving and helping, and that sense of community is really powerful. And Madeline and I feel are very fortunate because for the last, now it's, I guess, close to 25 years now, we've been traveling full-time to Unity churches around the United States, Canada, some in Europe. Now we've been to Australia as well, some Unity churches there, and also in the Caribbean. And everywhere we've gone, we've seen that this whole movement of unity, from my point of view anyway, is bringing a very healthy message and way of living. I think one of the healthiest in the sense that it's helping us to reconnect with the original wholeness that is our true nature and focusing on an attitude and a practice of inclusivity. This basic idea that I feel resonates really at the very core of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's teaching at the beginning, that we can see, I think. I love the cover of the bulletin with the prayer tower. How many of you have been to Unity Village? Some of you? Yeah. If you got to go there once in your life. I think we got to make that a requirement. It's like going to Mecca. You just got to do it. But if you can go there, and like that picture, I think, kind of reveals this sacred sense of having a prayer ministry, and at the core of that, this sense, as I was saying, of inclusivity. There's no one that's ever excluded. You can call and have people connect in it at a deep level of truth and affirming the truth for you, that what you are is a radiant expression of infinite love, that what we are is essentially, our true nature is eternal. And we're raised in a society, all of us from the time we're little infants, where we are bombarded with the exact opposite messages, that what we are is a name. In Sanskrit, the two words are nama and rupa. That means name and form. The basic idea that what we are is a body, a thing, an object that was born and will die, and that we're a name. Right? We have this name, we have this form, this separate identity, and that causes us to kind of contract and try to get what we want, to keep ourselves secure and safe, and to do things right, and so forth, get approval, and then to keep away what we don't want. So we end up being locked in a struggle. And I think what the great wisdom traditions of this earth have been telling us, the people who have awakened their true nature and freed themselves from this prison of feeling like I'm separate from life and from others, and therefore I'm locked in a competitive struggle for existence. And we see that very much propagated in our society at a deep level from the time we're little kids, our competitive economic system and grading systems and many other hierarchical systems. And what I see very clearly in Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's teaching was a sense of not fighting against that in a sense, but creating an alternative. And emphasizing that we've had these other alternatives also, that Jesus, essentially, his mission and ministry was to demonstrate healing in the sense that he didn't look at a person, say, for example, as just an object, a thing, a physical body. He saw the life. He saw the being that is eternal. And by seeing that and really seeing it, really seeing it and really knowing that person's consciousness was also helped to be brought into alignment with that truth, and whatever physical disabilities or problems were there or manifesting sort of gradually or sometimes immediately disappeared. And that kind of healing ability, I think, is something that we all have, in the sense that as we authentically make an effort to, as Charles and Myrtle Fillmore said, to live the way Jesus lived. And as Charles also said, he said to go straight to headquarters, right? That idea of connecting directly with the capacity that we have to know directly, that we can not only heal ourselves, we can not only learn to see ourselves more truly, that what we are was never born and will never die. We can begin to shed the fear and insecurity and the sense of having to prove something, and we can see that in others as well. So the foundation really of unity, I feel, is practical, and it's emphasizing practice itself. Practicing these understandings so that we improve, so that we increase our ability. And so this hinges, I think, a lot on intuition. The basic idea, again, as Charles said, of going straight to headquarters. He didn't mean necessarily just going straight to Myrtle. He meant going like internally, straight to headquarters. And I think that feminine, but the divine feminine, it really is a divine feminine aspect. I think we all have, whether we are men or women, it's this, the feminine is the capacity to be receptive. And so that's why meditation is so important. I think meditation and prayer and the ability to open and allow our consciousness to be receptive. And we're taught, again, in our society not to do this. We're taught, what do they say? Don't just stand there, do something. I like to say, don't just do something, stand there. Be a lot better. If we would do more of that, if we would do more of just, before we just continue, we find ourselves just propelled along, continually active and doing what we think was the right thing. But that propulsion pretty much comes from our cultural programming, where we're trying to fulfill and attain and get and so forth. And most of those driving forces come from the past voices that live inside of us, like our parents and our teachers and our ministers, not Reverend Cheryl, but other ministers that came along, and told us, you have to do this. But I think if we can really build into our day, into our week, into our year, time when we are not doing, when we're listening, going inside and just listening, being receptive, connecting with this feminine capacity to be receptive, so that instead of being propelled by the cultural program, which is not in our best interest, it really, so much of it is, what can I say, it's outmoded. And so I think we know in our hearts, all of us, that for our society to really flourish into the future, we can't keep living the way we've been living, that it's time to change the story, to have a new story. And we're the ones, I think, in unity, in many ways, who are receptive to this new story. It's really an ancient story. I mean, Jesus and the Buddha and great sages have articulated this story, but we have to create it ourselves, again, in this generation. So this new story, to be receptive to that and then to bring it forth. And I think it's really founded upon this idea of inclusion and this capacity to be receptive and honoring the sacred feminine dimension. And so one of the things that I think lies at the heart of all of this is questioning our treatment of each other, of nature, of animals, and really seeing that our welfare is interconnected. Essentially, I'll never be able to be happy myself if my life is in many ways founded upon doing things that cause oppression or exploitation or harm to others. And living in the United States, it's very easy for us, I think, to forget this because we have a very high-powered economy. I mean, it's losing a little steam, but essentially it's been a high-powered economy in the sense that it's not difficult for us, for example, in the United States, to buy huge amounts of grain, which we feed to animals, and then eat the meat and dairy of those animals. And we find people in other countries with less high-powered economies have a hard time getting any grain at all to eat even for themselves. But this is all we don't see the impact of all of this. And so I think as a spiritual path, for us to be just making an effort to understand the consequences, the ramifications of our actions, of our thoughts, of our feelings on those who are close to us and those who are farther away from us, and realize that when we, for example, take out our wallets and pay for things, this is a vote. These are votes that do get counted. I guarantee they get counted. I'm not sure about the other votes anymore, but these votes get counted. And so when we vote, we're really voting for something. And to think about that, do we want to? How can we vote for and support people who are doing the best they can to create beauty and harmony and love and healing in our world, and really support those activities and not support those activities that are causing suffering and hunger and war and so forth. And so I think this kind of a teaching is implicit in what the Buddha was teaching, what Jesus was teaching, and it really means essentially, really I think fundamentally two things. That ancient teaching, love God and love your neighbor. Those are the two fundamental things. Loving God means essentially listening, becoming receptive, connecting authentically with the transpersonal dimension, what's beyond my collection of thoughts and feelings that I think I know what is true. That whole thing, to get outside of that, to somehow transcend that and open to a higher dimension of knowing. And then out of that comes number two, loving our neighbor. And I think the more we love God, which is, whatever God represents for us, the infinite creative power, we begin to see that we can't love God without loving God's creation. And God's creation includes all beings. And so how do we actually do that? Love really requires us to make an effort to understand. There can be no love without understanding. And there can be no understanding without love. And we've been raised in a society where we've been taught that we can understand something by disconnecting. We have this sort of hard, materialist, kind of a pseudo-scientific idea that if we analyze something, then we understand it. We have people doing and teaching us as kids to learn by being separate and analyzing, and so we're taught in many ways to cultivate this eye of separation. So I think what we're really yearning for today, in order to be able to create a society of peace and freedom and healing, and live in harmony with each other and with all manifestations of life here, is to soften our eyes, to learn to look with eyes of kindness and caring for those who are different from us, those who have a different race, a different age, a different preference, a different species, those who are in different situations, and look with soft eyes. Because I think when we go deep into meditation, we realize that there's one life living through all manifestations. We are not separate from other manifestations. And once we get an actual feeling for that, we realize that the greatest joy that we can have is to somehow bless others. There is no joy in somehow beating them. I mean, getting more or having more, or it's a trick. And if we believe that, we're being tricked. We're serving somebody else's agenda. And so what Jesus kept saying, I think what the Buddha kept saying, is come back to your heart, see that there's one life living through all of us. The greatest joy we can ever have, which is our true nature, is joy. Actually, we don't even need an outside reason to have any joy. This is something that's also, we've been tricked. We've been taught that we can't really be happy unless we buy those products that are on the Walmart ads or whatever. We have to realize that the joy is always here. And anything that we get from the outside, I don't know. Emerson, I come from Concord, Massachusetts, and so I learned to swim in Walden Pond and grew up in, Thoreau School and Alcott School and Emerson and all that. And there was this feeling, Emerson said, things are in the saddle and ride mankind. That basic idea that, our things that we have, we want to get more and more and more. And that, in a sense, those things begin to ride us. And there's this beautiful poem by Rabindranath Tagore where he talks about how, in this poem, how he, for years and years, he yearned to get more and get more and get more. And God was so generous and gave him more and more. And he had so much stuff and he was so abundant. And then his prayer completely changed. And he said, God, take it away, take it away. I don't want all this. It's too much trouble. Yeah, take it. I only want the bare infinity of your sacred presence. That's all I want. That's it. That's all I need. I don't need anything. I don't need all this stuff. Let's simplify. That's what Thoreau said. He said, simplify, simplify, simplify. And I think the more we reduce the things that we think we need, and the more we can shrink our footprint on the planet, and the more we can think of the consequences of our actions for others, and the more we can take time to realize that, in a way we have a short time on this earth. It's not that long. And so instead of finding ourselves the years flying by and we're actively engaged in pursuits, that maybe at that moment when we leave our body, which is definitely coming, it is definitely coming. Yeah. Nobody's going to get out of that one. That moment is coming, and it's not far away, really. I remember when I was in my early 20s, maybe 22, I was in Oakland, California, and I was taking this class in Chinese. And the woman who was teaching the course in Chinese, she was from China, and she was so funny, really. She was really funny. And she always telling these jokes, but she was serious one day. She said, and you got to remember something. If you ever go to China and you try to tell people anything, like you're some kind of an authority, and you're not at least 60 years old, they'll just laugh at you. Because China is a society that honors elders. And they think if you're not 60, you're still wet behind the ears, you really don't know anything, you need to get some experience before you try to tell anybody anything. And so it was so great when a couple of years ago, Madeline and I went to Australia, we went to China, and I was giving this lecture actually on the World Peace Diet, and the World Peace Diet had been translated into Chinese, and I was in Taipei giving a lecture, and 2,000 people showed up to hear my lecture because it was a bestseller in Chinese there in that country. And so it was really interesting to be able to stand in front of these 2,000 people and say, and now you have to listen to me because I am 60 years old. I know that rule. And they were like, well, you don't look like you're 60. I said, well, but I am. and so but the point behind that for me is that, gosh, where did the years go? It goes by so quickly. And so our life is precious. When we see these beautiful flowers that are here, the reason that touches our heart is because we know they're not plastic, right? I mean, there's something transient. There's something beautiful in transiency. And so I just want to close with this idea that, when we feel into our life and we feel into the time we have on this earth, to realize that it's precious because it's just this, every day is precious. And every day is an opportunity, and we don't have an unlimited number of them. So to realize that we can be grateful for every day for another opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve, to share, to give, to bless, to be part of an awakening, to contribute to a healing, to help, in a sense, further the movement in our society for a world where peace and justice and freedom are actually possible. And I think all of us know in our bones that we live in really critical times, that the old stories we just can't keep those old stories of separation and competition when we have technology that can blow everybody up 10,000 times over and destroy rainforests and oceans very easily, and climate stability and everything else. So the whole idea is that now it's time to find how we're here to live. And perhaps if we look at caterpillars and we see how they're just voraciously consuming and consuming and consuming, and that's all they think about is how they want to eat. But then within the body of a caterpillar, at a certain point, there are certain cells that change. Biologists now call these cells imaginal cells. And they, instead of contributing to that rampant consuming of these caterpillars, they turn their attention in a whole different direction, and they start building a cocoon for a transformation into a butterfly. And I think, in a sense, perhaps the unity movement is an imaginal cell within the body of the caterpillar of mankind. And if we're drawn here, it's because we no longer are fascinated by just getting stuff and the old story of domination and exploitation, and the more you have. And we see a butterfly, a new vision for a new future of wholeness and kindness and respect for all life. And that we can celebrate that and we can further that. So I want to thank all of you for the efforts that you're making, because I think we have to remember that as soon as we go out of these doors and we're in the world, there's a whole other mindset in many ways. And so to create communities of sanity, of justice, of freedom, of compassion, of caring, of kindness, of mercy and tenderness and gentleness, and to bring our lives into alignment personally, and then to create a community where we can learn from each other and support that. That's a great thing to do for the short number of years we have here on this planet spinning in outer space. We come here, and maybe we're called here. Maybe we answered a call to come at this time to help create communities that are going to bring the possibility of another way of living forward. And it's a great challenge. And it's a challenge that we have to work on together. That's the key. And that's why this community is so important. But also, not only together, but individually, each one of us take time to meditate, connect, clarify, purify, question. That's the key thing, questioning the official stories of our society and creating new stories. Stories based on the truth of the infinite interconnectedness of all life, that all sentient beings yearn for the same thing we do, to treat others with kindness and compassion. And that as we do that, we'll find our own happiness just expanding and new doorways opening that we can't even see them right now. Right now it looks like a bunch of walls, like, oh gosh, there's no way forward. As we transform, suddenly doors will appear in those walls and we'll go through. And we'll find on the other side of those walls, as Rumi said, there's a beautiful field, and I'll meet you there. So much love to you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.